the Mississippi Crop Situation Podcast featuring the Crop Doctors.
Good Friday morning from the Crop Doctors Podcast studio in Stoneville. Tom and I have Madison Dixon back with us. If y'all remember, Madison was on with us last year, and he's been at several Mississippi State meetings as well. I think didn't you talk at the short course?
Sure. Well, our director, Dr. Alex Thomason, presented at the row crop short course. Yes, sir.
Okay. Madison works at the new Agricultural Autonomy Institute. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's it.
I got the name right. And last summer, he and Dr. Thomason were on right about the time that opened.
That's exactly right.
Give or take a few weeks. That's a completely new center revolving around autonomous agriculture, whether it be by ground or by air. And we've had a lot of goings on in that area in the meantime, so we wanted to get Madison back in here and give everybody an update on what was going on. Tom's blood pressure's high.
It's not as high as what you'd think. I think everybody thinks mine's always just ratcheted.
You were using a lot of words when we were walking over here. That's why I just assumed.
I was. When do I not, though, this time of year?
I was picking up on frustration, Tom.
A little bit.
You know I'm going to say it. Don't start on Friday.
Lack of air. Just stop. I'm not calling this Friday. This is Thursday extended. I know. Don tells me the same thing.
Somewhere in southeast Arkansas, my daddy's chuckling at you right now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Your dad would send a text or call me or something else. I'm aware.
All right. So, Madison, I had to go to the courthouse this morning and get truck tags.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got the regular. I did get the black one, though.
There you go.
My question is, if you were going to have a vanity tag, what would it say?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have a good answer for you on that one, Jason. Now, I will say so. I shell out the extra $50 for the Mississippi State tag, so I'm proud to represent with that one. But as far as what the alphanumerical letters on the tag,
it's got to capture your personality, but not be too flashy either.
Okay. Well, here'd be a good one. I guess I'd go with two BZY because I pretty much stay too busy all the time. So I guess that might not speak much to vanity, but it captures my day-to-day pretty well.
You probably couldn't get it because Tom would already have it.
So I was just going to say, he'd steal it from me. He'd probably make it to the courthouse before I would, though. Come on, my driver's license expired. We were standing over there in Starkville. I'm like, oh, gosh, I have to go get my driver's license renewed before I get on an airplane. I just used my passport, which was fine.
Yep.
Madison, the last time you were on would have been the initiation of the Ag Autonomy Institute. I don't know what I'm saying this morning, even bad Friday, I guess. Why don't you give us a little bit more of an update since that's really been unveiled and initiated and you all are now in that nice new institute?
Absolutely. Well, first I want to thank you guys for having me back, and I appreciate the first invitation, and you guys are exactly right. That came when the Agricultural Autonomy Institute at MSU was brand spanking new. So just last summer, this whole new institute was officially stood up, and we came and spoke, Dr. Thomason and I, Dr. Thomason being our founding director of the Agricultural Autonomy Institute. Remember, we came and spoke with you guys last year right after everything was official, and we were very excited and privileged to be able to share that news with your listeners. And since then, it's been wide open. We've been very busy. We've been fortunate to bring on a couple of affiliate faculty from the Department of Agricultural and Biological Engineering who are working on several projects in agricultural autonomy. Also got us a couple of really, really strong student workers. They've been undergraduate students since we brought them on, and got one right now that's getting ready to graduate in May. He'll be moving into a graduate assistant role beginning graduate school after that. A couple of new faces in terms of graduate students, be bringing on two more graduate assistants. Those two guys will be starting in the fall. First guy will be starting over the summer. And just really, really out there trying to spread the good word about the MSU Agricultural Autonomy Institute to anybody that would listen. And we're focused on all things at the intersection of agriculture, obviously, but also autonomous systems. And I truly still believe, just like I shared with you guys on the previous visit, that those two areas are some major thrust areas for Mississippi State University in terms of research. Obviously, agriculture, that goes without saying, but in the autonomous system space, really going back to 2015, MSU has continued to make a name and gain national recognition for our research and educational efforts in autonomous systems. So I mentioned 2015 specifically because that was the year that MSU was awarded the FAA's UAS Center of Excellence designation. There's also obviously the Center for Advanced Vehicular Systems there at Mississippi State, primarily focused on terrestrial ground-based vehicles. As you guys both know, I spent several years working at the Raspet Flight Research Laboratory at Mississippi State, focused on UAS or drone research before I took the new role with the Ag Autonomy Institute. That all just really speaks to the capabilities and the expertise that the university has on the autonomous systems side. And when you combine that with all the historical expertise and world-renowned research that's been done on the agriculture front, what you end up with is an ideal opportunity and perfect positioning for Mississippi State to come out in front and be first out of the starting gate in this new emerging field of agricultural autonomy. There's been a ton of interest. We've had a lot of meetings with various stakeholders, both on the industry side, government side, and end users, growers themselves. Everyone kind of has a feel for where things are headed in terms of agricultural technology. Precision agriculture has been around for a pretty long time, and folks are kind of adept at what that means and all of the aspects of precision agriculture. And we believe that agricultural autonomy is a natural continuation of precision agriculture. It's really serving as kind of the next generation or the next chapter of precision agriculture through the implementation and adoption of autonomous systems. And I don't believe there's anywhere else in the country or the world that's better positioned to lead in this field than Mississippi State.
So is the Institute, are y'all staffed up all the way, or are you still looking to fill some positions?
So we're looking to fill some positions. We've actually got 2 positions that are available on jobs.msstate.edu right now. One is for a research associate. The other is for a postdoctoral researcher. So actively still reviewing applicants to those positions right now. I would say we're definitely not totally staffed up, Jason. We've got those 2 positions available. We intend to have some more as we're able to successfully get some projects through the door. We're still pretty lean at this point, but that's by design. So again, going back to MSU already having so much expertise and infrastructure in place, both on the agriculture front and the autonomous systems front, we're fortunate that we don't need to build a big behemoth institute from scratch. All the pieces are already in place. And again, this is a real credit to Dr. Thomason because he saw that those pieces were in place and recognized that agricultural autonomy is something that would fit very well at Mississippi State University. We don't have to go out and try to secure pieces. It's already there, but what was lacking was a central clearinghouse, a central institute that combines the 2 fields and provides the facilities and the assistance through our staff to be able to secure opportunities. Like I said, everything at the intersection of ag and autonomous systems, we've got the experts, we've got the capabilities. We needed a central clearinghouse to be able to bring these folks together, bring projects in that play to the strengths of the university. And as we continue to do that, we expect to grow, we expect to hire more. Long-term vision, we'd love to have our own brick-and-mortar laboratory maybe out at the North Farm, but in the meantime, MAFIS has been very kind to us. We've got office space located at the PACE Seed Technology Lab there on campus. That includes not only offices in the front administrative building, but also a 4,800 square foot autonomy lab in the back right now. So we are very well resourced to be able to do this work. We've got a great team already in place. I think we'll continue to grow that team as needed, but we're equally focused on providing opportunities for the experts, the researchers, principal investigators, faculty, students, the whole gamut, everywhere that there's individuals that are working on something that's ag autonomy related at Mississippi State University. They've got a home and a place to do good work at the Ag Autonomy Institute.
With this field kind of being really new, Madison, when y'all are looking to hire somebody, are you looking for a specific background or are you more looking for the individual?
In a lot of cases, I think it's both, Jason. So if they've got an agriculture background or an autonomy background, then obviously those type of candidates will be at the top of the list. Now, you don't have to be an expert in either of those fields. In fact, I don't necessarily consider myself an expert in either of those fields. On the agriculture front, we have a small family farm up on the Bolivar Sunflower County line, and so I've grown up around it. I've moved around over the course of my life and haven't necessarily grown up doing it the way that so many have here, but I've got a great appreciation for it and have been exposed to it and around it for most of my life. If you tell me to go get the 11th, 16th socket, I know what you're asking me to do, but if you ask me to go do something that requires some agricultural knowledge and real thorough understanding, I'm probably not that guy. There are those that are much more knowledgeable on the agriculture front than I am. Same can be said of autonomous systems. But any candidate that's got background, exposure, experience in either of those fields, that's going to make for a really strong candidate for the positions that we're hiring. In terms of specific skills, I mean, it's wide ranging. Everything from your mechanical engineering background in the ag field all the way through some of the latest and greatest technologies in robotics, things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, remote sensing. The skill sets really run the gamut. They're very diverse, and so any individual that has some type of experience or wants to gain that type of experience and has some education to back them up, I really do think we've got only those two positions posted for now, but depending on your personal experience and background and interests, the types of applicants that we're looking for could be very diverse in terms of skill sets, experience, all the above.
I just sit here astonished thinking back in my own career, taking a little bit of, GIS and GPS type driven spatial analysis, remote sensing, and in the direction that this has all gone. Where do you see this going over the next decade? It doesn't sound like it's going to be slowing down, and definitely the expansion into some of these new areas is important, and especially when you think about the direction that ag is going just in general.
Yep. So what I always like to point to is that there was a CNBC article, I guess it's about a year old now, but in that article, John Deere's chief technology officer on the record is stating that their goal is a fully autonomous production cycle for corn and soybean growers by the year 2030. Here we sit in April of 2024, and I mean, you're talking about 6 years out. I think that is an aggressive goal, but I do think that it is an achievable goal. And to the extent that the Ag Autonomy Institute can help in achieving that goal, we're here to serve, and that's, not exclusive to John Deere, but in any other major industry players, any government stakeholders that are interested in advancing not only the tech, the tech is extremely capable. It continues to impress me. It's almost just like the iPhone. Every year another iPhone comes out. It's got a better camera than you've seen before. And if you go back to, I don't even know what the iPhones are at now, but if you rewind, say, 5 or 6 years and you go pick up one of those older phones, it's hard to realize just how far the technology's come till you go back and you use some of the older tech and see, wow, this has really come a long way. I see that exact same thing happening right now in agriculture. The technology is extremely capable, and it is improving and advancing very, very, very quickly. And then, Tom, you mentioned GIS. So I'm a GIS guy myself. I studied GIS as part of my undergrad, and just so happened that I had come from, as a kid growing up flying model aircraft for fun, and I never thought that would lead to much in terms of career prospects. But I was fortunate and blessed that after finishing an undergraduate degree that was mostly focused on GIS and learned a little bit about remote sensing during that process. Then the commercial grade drones started to come out. The price point on those was much lower than previous, and so they were attainable for folks that previously wouldn't have considered themselves, an on-demand GIS or remote sensing data collection type person. Well, all of a sudden you had fairly cheap drones that had pretty decent cameras on them. Those have all continued to improve as well, and the ability to go out and to capture aerial imagery and to be able to geo-rectify that imagery and use it to aid in your decision-making and your farming practices, all of that stuff, the cost barrier, the technology barrier, they've all come down considerably over the course of the last 15, 20 years. It's part of the actual, operations now. It's not unobtainium. It's something that's just part of day-to-day ability to be able to incorporate that into your operations. And that is exactly where I see the overall industry headed in terms of incorporating autonomous systems. So in the same way that GPS integration, ultimately led to things like driver assisted steering or auto steering of machinery in the field, there was an adoption curve associated with that technology. But once the early adopters really started to see the benefits of that, and then within their growers network, everybody knows everybody. And so if somebody gets a piece of technology and it really, does a bang up job for them, it's not long before other folks start to follow suit. I expect we'll start to see the same type of early adoption and have those early adopters kind of lead the charge for what will ultimately blossom into a larger adoption of autonomous technologies, becoming the norm, becoming a regular part of operations in the field for all of our growers across the state. Exact timeline on that, it varies depending on who you talk to. Again, the John Deere Chief Technology Officer, their goal is 2030. I think that's probably a good timeline for folks that are aggressive and really, really want to be early adopters and get a hold of this technology as quickly as they can. And then thereafter, in the years that follow, I think we will continue to see more and more folks invest in the technology, adopt and incorporate it into their operations. Once the benefits of the technology has been vetted a little bit, you've got some more folks using it. That's going to drive continuous adoption, and hopefully those benefits spread far and wide to everybody who's interested in it.
Madison, there's a lot of layers to this. There's the technology, which you said is pretty much out in front, and it's probably advancing faster than definitely what we can keep up with it, and maybe even than what you can keep up with it, who's in it every day. And then there's price, and related to that would be supply and demand. There's comfort level with the consumer, and then there's the other stuff that comes along with it, the regulations and stuff. So I feel like listening to you talk and the conversations we've had and the times I've heard you talk over the last year and a half or so, that the regulations is kind of chasing the technology and the demand for it. So touch on that and how that's evolved, and also evolving quickly.
You're exactly right, Jason. So the technology is way out in front of the regulations, and the regulators are always playing catch up, and the end users typically find themselves caught somewhere in between, wanting to invest in and wanting to leverage the technology while also wanting to make sure that they're compliant with the regulations and doing everything the right way. And that can be very, very challenging. I'll speak specifically to the UAS or the drone situation right now, because I've lived that for, I guess this will be about 10 years now. So if you rewind to 2014, that's when the FAA first came out with what at that time was known as the 333 exemption process. For those that have been working with drones for a while, you may remember that was the earliest pathway to be able to fly drones commercially within the United States. That eventually gave way in 2016 to what's known as Part 107. That's the Code of Federal Regulations that specifically governs commercial drone operations. So after that came in 2016, what you saw was a really large rush of folks into the UAS industry, if you want to call it that. I would argue that UAS drones, they support multiple industries. In and of themselves, does that constitute an industry? It does in some ways, but by and large, the technology is used across a lot of different industries in a lot of different ways. So you saw a ton of people, kind of flood in after Part 107 came out in 2016, and there has been continuous growth in the number of registered UAS operators with the FAA, as well as the number of registered UAS aircraft with the FAA. When I last checked earlier this week, it was over 700,000 drones have been registered with the FAA since the implementation of Part 107 in 2016. Now, getting a little bit closer to present day, if you fast forward from 2016 to just last year, in June of last year, the FAA made amendments to Part 137 regulations, not to be confused with Part 107, but 137. Part 137 is the regulatory framework which governs all aerial applications of any products. Now, agriculture makes up a very, very big part of that, but so does, say, firefighting. Anything that you can apply by air from an aircraft is going to be governed under Part 137. And the regulatory compliance requirements for Part 137 were significantly, I don't want to say more burdensome, but there was a lot more required of the person seeking Part 137 certification than there was of somebody seeking Part 107 certification just to fly small drones commercially. So with that change last June, with the updates to Part 137 that the FAA implemented, what that created was a streamlined path for those who want to use UAS to perform aerial applications. So they were no longer subjected to the same regulatory burden, if you will, as your traditional ag aviators, your traditional crop dusters that are flying large aircraft, carrying large payloads. The drone folks no longer have to follow the exact same process. Even though they're all being certified under Part 137, the drone guys now have a bit of an easier, more expedient path to go and obtain their Part 137 operator certificate. So as you can see, I mean, just within that timeline that I just laid out, you had around 2014, there's the Part 333 exemption process. 2016, Part 107 is implemented. It goes on till 2023 when there's regulatory changes to Part 137 that create new opportunities for UAS operators. The exemption process you now go through, if you seek to fly drones over 55 pounds, it can be under and over, but the exemption you have to go through if you're a commercial operator and you want to fly drones to do aerial applications, that's now a 44807 exemption, where it was a 333 exemption back in 2014. You're talking about 10 years of a continuous moving target in terms of regulations and what regulatory compliance looks like. There are more changes that are expected later this year, most likely to come after November once the election's behind us. Those regulations, I believe, are going to open the doors for beyond visual line of sight operation of drones, which is something that everybody has been, the folks within the drone industry or folks that use drones in their respective industries, everybody's probably aware that beyond visual line of sight's been one of the biggest limiting factors in terms of using drones commercially. Has to stay within the line of sight of the remote operator on the ground, and you know, honestly, these aircraft, these drones, they're mostly operated off of radio frequencies, typically 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8. Some of the bigger ones that MSU operates on the 900 megahertz band, but those are flown on radio frequencies that can extend much further than the pilot's visual line of sight. So that's always been a limitation within the drone community, and now the regulations we're expecting later this year will in some ways probably take some of the shackles off of beyond visual line of sight operations.
So what's that going to extend it from? Because what in general then would be line of sight in a general distance?
Yep. Within aviation, visual flight rules, VFR, is pretty standard. If you want to go beyond visual flight rules and get an instrument rating, there's a lot more training and credentialing that's required within the aviation community. But visual flight rules stipulate 3 statute miles of visibility. That's not a direct correlation to what visual line of sight means for a remote operator that's flying a drone. So obviously if you're on the ground, you can have obstructions that would impede your visual line of sight. But if you assume we're out here in the Delta on a beautiful day like today and you're flying that drone to the far limits of your visual abilities, I did a study previously, this has been several years ago now, but that visual line of sight in the FAA's eyes means the pilot's ability not only to see that aircraft, but also to maintain orientation and control of the aircraft. Say your GPS on that drone goes out and you no longer have assisted flight control and you've got to fly that thing fully manually. Well, if you've got it so far away from you that you can't see your aeronautical lighting, you know, these drones have red and green lights on them, same as a boat does, same as a big plane does. Those are intended to be able for you and for others to be able to tell the orientation of the aircraft. And if you get out past what the study I did in the past shows, about 1,500 feet, you can no longer see those lights and the orientation of the aircraft in order to be able to manually pilot it back to you. So those that take the regulations at face value and they try to directly translate them from traditional aviation into the UAS aviation would argue that 3 statute miles is how far they can see. In practicality, the truth is if you fly that drone past 1,500, 1,600 feet away from you, even if it's unobstructed, even if it's a clear day and you can see just fine, chances are you probably can't see the lights on that aircraft and you would really struggle to maintain orientation and pilot that thing back to you in the event of a system failure.
Step us through somebody getting into this industry. Just assume they've purchased a quality product.
Sure.
and they want to maybe be able to operate commercially in Mississippi.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll start. We'll leave the spray drones to one side, and we'll address those more at length in a minute. And let's just start with regular old Part 107 commercial drone operations. So you've bought, a quality drone, and you want to go out and use it for scouting, or maybe you want to do aerial photography for real estate, whatever the case might be. You want to fly the drone in some way that's going to be considered commercial. First thing you need to do is register that aircraft, which can be done at the FAA's Drone Zone website. If you Google FAA Drone Zone, it'll pop right up, be the first thing on Google or whatever your preferred search engine is. You'll register that aircraft. Next thing you got to do once you receive your registration number is go ahead and have that. It has to be visibly marked on the aircraft itself where it's accessible to any aviation safety inspector or law enforcement officer that wants to see it. You can't put your registration number inside the battery cavity or anything silly like that. So register the aircraft, mark your registration number on the aircraft, and then next you need to make sure, if you're going to operate commercially, you need to make sure that you go and obtain your Part 107 UAS remote operator certificate. That is the certificate that licenses you to be able to go out and perform commercial drone operations. In order to receive that license, that certificate, you need to do a little bit of studying. The amount of studying varies depending on if you've got any background in aviation at all, but there's plenty of resources available online. I always advocate for those that are seeking Part 107 certification. Advocate get your information direct from the horse's mouth. Go to the FAA's website. They've got everything you need to know on there. They've got practice questions. Everything that you need to be able to pass the exam and get certified is available for free at faa.gov/UAS. There are other outlets that offer specialty training online, and prices for that range anywhere from $250 up to $500 or even $1,000. Those groups are usually just repackaging the material the FAA makes available for free and then selling it to those that are trying to get certified. For anyone that's listening, feel free to use whatever study materials that you like. Just know that everything you need to know is available for free on the FAA's website. Study up, and then you'll need to go to an FAA designated computer testing center. The closest one here is going to be up at Delta State University's Commercial Aviation Department. There's also one in Jackson. There's one over in Columbus, and I think there's a fourth somewhere here in the state. But you can't take the test at home. You got to go to an FAA test center, take the test, pass the test. You'll get your remote pilot certification on paper first, and then they'll mail you a permanent one on a little license card. And then once you got that aircraft registered, you've got your remote pilot certificate. The last thing you need to do is make sure that your drone complies with the FAA's remote ID rule, which just went into full effect. There was a grace period that carried through March of this year. That grace period's now ended. So you'll want to make sure whatever drone it is that you purchased, capable as it may be in terms of flight and cameras and stuff for a regulatory compliance standpoint, you want to make sure that drone is equipped with a remote ID capability either inherent to the drone itself, or some of the older drones you can buy a little module and attach that to the drone, and then you're in compliance. So that's it in a nutshell on the 107 side. Jason, I can dive into the 137 stuff if you want, or we can save that for later. That's a whole nother ball of wax there.
I say dive into it.
All right, so we've talked through Part 107. That's the easier path. I guess the last thing I'll say on that is, as part of getting your Part 107 remote pilot certification, you'll need to know those regulations inside and out. And then what that does is allow you to operate within the limits of the regulations. For example, Part 107 is only good for drones up to 55 pounds. You're supposed to operate them at or below 400 feet, maximum altitude, a number of other limitations, but those are two kind of biggest ones. Pivoting to the Part 137 and this new streamlined path that is available as of June of last year through the FAA's amended regulations. What you'll have to do on the 137 front, and understand this is specific to if you want to use drones to perform aerial applications of agricultural products. What it could be liquid, could be solid like granular fertilizers, or if you want to do cover crop seeding. These drones have the ability to do all of the above, but understand that all of those are considered aerial applications, and de facto they are governed under Part 137. So if you're a commercial operator and you want to operate under Part 137, all of those things I just mentioned for 107 still apply. So you're going to need to register that aircraft. You're going to need to obtain a Part 107 operator certificate. You're going to need to make sure that the drone has remote ID capability to be in compliance with the remote ID law. Now, with all of that already being done, here's where your starting point is for Part 137. So you'll need to pursue a Section 44807 exemption. That's an exemption I mentioned a minute ago. It's basically the revamped version of what Part 333 exemptions were 10 years ago. You secure a 44807 exemption, and then you need to move forward into your Part 137 Agricultural Operator's Certificate. And so once you've got your aircraft registered, you have your 44807 exemption, all of that information or inputs into your eventual Part 137 Ag Operator Certificate. You fill all that information out. You'll ultimately submit that to the FAA, and if you meet all of the qualifications, you'll then get a Part 137 operator certificate that takes care of you at the federal level. There's also state regulatory requirements, and it's worth noting and commending the Mississippi Department of Ag and Commerce for also amending their regulations last December. And so the amended state regulations will now allow for aerial applications by drone as well. And in fact, the regulations and the way that they've been structured at the state level is why I want to give kudos to the Department of Ag and Commerce. It's agnostic of the aircraft. It's the same regulations, whether you're flying a traditional big air tractor or if you're flying one of the newer drones. You have to be able to comply with the state's regulations regardless of what the aircraft is, and if you can comply with their regulations and you have all of your certifications, then you can get your state level applicator license. That does come with some insurance requirements, a couple of other things, but the point being, once you're taken care of at the federal level, that's the prerequisite to begin your state paperwork. When you need to get your state certification, you'll work through the Mississippi Bureau of Plant Industry. If you're able to comply with all of their requirements, which if you've gotten your federal credentials, you'll be able to, then the last thing you've got to do is register your aircraft and get your operator certificate with the state, and you're good to go.
Best take-home message there is you can't just go on YouTube and somebody tell you, hey, you can go out and do this. And I have read enough of the Part 137 materials to know that that's all going to be written by somebody that teaches you how to fly an airplane.
Yep.
A small airplane, not a big jumbo jet, but a small airplane that you can land on an airfield. So everything that's in there is going to be related to monitoring weather and how that may affect instrumentation and everything else. I mean, that basically boils that book down in a nutshell.
Yep, you are exactly right on multiple levels, Tom. So I'll try to unpack as much as I can there. But Part 137 as a whole is still almost universally applicable just to your large traditional aircraft and not to UAS. And therein lies the reason for the 44807 exemption. There are still provisions of Part 137 that UAS simply cannot comply with because of the nature of the differences between those types of aircraft. Take, for example, keeping the aircraft registration in the cockpit of the aircraft. Well, a drone doesn't have a cockpit, and you can't keep a registration in there, and it's just physically impossible to comply with that regulation. That's why your 44807 exemption will include specific provisions of Part 137 that you will be granted exemption from once you get it approved, and that's the only piece, that's the key piece that enables you to then go forward with getting a Part 137 operator certificate. Because if you're not exempt from those and you're flying a drone, you're doing so outside of compliance with the Part 137 regulations. You got to have that 44807 exemption. So that's on the regulatory front. Let's talk in practical terms. You mentioned watching a YouTube video and seeing, here's somebody that's using this and says that you can use it. I have, in personal experience, I have been burned in the past by taking the advice of YouTube talking heads and also of sales representatives at survey instrument dealerships, because at this point in time, 10 years ago, with the earliest 333 exemptions, lots and lots of interest, and even more so after 2016 with Part 107 came out, but there were lots of drones being marketed as having, air quotes here, survey grade accuracy. I was working in the surveying and mapping industry at that time, and so a lot of different survey instrument dealerships that sell GPS and total stations and all the equipment you use for doing surveying started getting into the drone game and selling these very high grade drones and advertising them as having survey grade, centimeter accuracy. What I found in personal experience and through hundreds and hundreds of flight hours and trial and error and learning the hard way is that at that time, I won't say the drones can't do it now, but at that time, circa 2014 to 2016, 2018, it was very, very difficult to get survey grade accuracy, vertical accuracy, elevation, especially when you're using a drone. It's possible. You can use LiDAR as opposed to photogrammetry. That tends to be more accurate, but point being, the marketed capabilities of these drones do not always directly translate into real performance out in the field, and that's something to be cautious of. We're fast forwarding 10 years now, and here we are, 2024. With the new 44807 exemptions, there are lots and lots of companies that are now building, selling, marketing aerial application spray drones. You'll see a lot of promotional videos on YouTube, see a lot of folks using it. I am 100% in favor of using the technology where we can for it to be beneficial, but I do definitely recommend everybody exercise caution when you're evaluating these products, because something as simple as flight time could be marketed as 30, 45 minutes. You get out into the field on a day where you've got kind of like today, we've got about a 10-mile-an-hour north wind. You might see that flight time in half of what was actually advertised for that particular drone. Another consideration, like swath width. You might see something advertised as having a 30-foot, swath width, and then you get out into the field and find that the rotor wash from this very, very big drone is shooting that, whatever it is that you're trying to apply could be shooting way further out than 30 foot. And what you might end up with is a 60 or an 80-foot swath width, but I wouldn't call it an effective swath width because you're causing so much drift. All of that to say that the spray drone technology is extremely exciting right now, and it's something that we're very focused on at the Ag Autonomy Institute. We've got a couple of projects, particular thanks to the Mississippi Soybean Promotion Board and the Mississippi Corn Promotion Board, who we're working with. Myself, the Ag Autonomy Institute, Dr. Thomason, Ag and Bioengineering, Dr. Darren Dodds, Plant and Soil Sciences. We're doing spray drone research right now for those commodity boards. We are going to learn a whole lot in pretty short order about the real world performance of these systems in the field, actually doing the work that they're supposed to do. And we definitely intend to cross-check that against what the marketed, advertised specs and capabilities of these drones are. What we hope to end up with is a really, really informed data set that growers can use to be able to understand whether they're being sold, something that's not necessarily what was as advertised, or if they're truly getting something that's a capable system that's going to hold up in the field in very demanding environments like we know exist here in the Delta. You don't want to invest tens of thousands of dollars into something that isn't going to deliver the capabilities you expected to get. So just be cognizant of that. That's not to spook anyone or cause anyone to reconsider looking at the technology or investing in it. I think it's a great investment, and I think that it's something that will benefit a lot of growers' operations, in particular the aerial application services. They have over time come around to the drones and the benefits of using those, but it just is important to note that do your due diligence, do your homework. If you can see a demonstration before you try to actually put a deposit or something like that down, anything and everything you can do to educate yourself before taking the plunge and diving into this technology and taking on all of that regulatory burden that I was talking about just a minute ago. You want to make sure you're getting a good drone that is going to last for a while and do what it needs to do, and not ultimately give you more headaches than actual good performance.
Madison, you had another project that you mentioned that maybe our listeners might be able to help you with a little bit. Once you wrap up talking about that.
Absolutely, yes. So thank you for that, Jason. So we do have one more project, this one in collaboration with Dr. Xiaofei Li and Ag Economics at Mississippi State University. This project, it's got kind of a long name, so it's Socioeconomic Implications of Agricultural Autonomy in Small to Mid-Sized Mississippi Farms. Long name, short point here. The point being, we want to understand the current lay of the land for technology growers are using across the state, and how much familiarity there is with certain types of autonomous technology. So we have a survey that has been prepared and that we would very much like to get growers lined up to respond to. I recognize the timing right now is a bit challenging because everybody's in the field planting, getting ready at the start of the growing season here, and everybody's very busy. But to the extent that anybody's interested in answering this survey, it's very short, won't take you any more than 4 minutes, and it focuses on level of exposure to different types of autonomous technologies and levels of implementation or adoption, wanting to get a feel for the grower community across the state and what type of technologies they've been exposed to, and moreover, what type of technologies they've chosen to go on ahead and invest in and incorporate into their operations on the farm. So if anybody's interested in that type of survey, I can tell you we'd be certainly very, very grateful for your survey response. And if you're interested and want to participate, you can reach out to me directly. My email at the Ag Autonomy Institute is mdixon@aai.msstate.edu. Like I said, if you're interested, shoot me an email, or you can reach out however you like, and we'd be very glad to have you participate.
Or you can text Jason, and he will just send you Madison's phone number.
This is true.
That'll work too. I've done that a few times.
Madison, we really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
that's one, it's good to see you again. I mean, even though we just saw you a couple of weeks ago. Two, we really appreciate the information. And three, that's good information, because I think that's important to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, I know I've spoken a lot about the spray drones and particularly about the regulations, and so I hope I hadn't put anybody to sleep on a tractor out in the field right now, but I definitely think that it's worth talking about. There's a lot of interest around it, and I thank you guys very much for having me back and giving me a chance to be able to speak to it.
You got an open invitation, man. Anytime you want to come.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Well, thank you,
Anytime,
guys.
because this information is going to keep coming. I would point out that, Jason should keep in mind that an autonomous tractor is going to actually work on a Friday. So
There we go.
unless Don or your daddy program it.
Don't let Don program it. Don was fighting one the other day.
No, we won't do that.
Don missed his lunch because of autonomous issues. And he gets a little testy when he misses his lunch.
Mm-hmm. The Pesci Snickers moment. Yeah.
The Mississippi Crop Situation Podcast is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.